Oh boy, I have my hands full here. There are things to call out about this anime. I tend to look at the good things rather than the bad when it comes to making videos. Videos take hours to write, record, and edit. And then comes the thumbnails, titling, the packaging of the video, which is actually a really important part of the video. So many steps, so much work. And I tend to want all that work to result in something positive rather than something, well, hateful and negative. That being said, there are issues within this anime that I need to point out to show that I'm not ignorant of these issues and to help point the blame in the right direction. So these main two issues are the lack of animation in the first two episodes and the mishandling of the IP in general by the publishers and the production committee. So let's start off with what's gonna get the clicks. In terms of animation, this anime has been about a 2 out of 10, although it pains me to say that a lot. The first episode was getting a lot of flack for its simple panning shots and still images, and all that criticism was correct. A large percentage of the first episode was panning shots and still frames. Not a great start when it comes to an action anime, even though the source material for those chapters were converted very accurately, except for one small section that was cut in its transition into the anime that I've covered in my previous videos. It was Royal Ripper's introduction. There were also other examples of a drop in quality, examples of choppy and, well, bad animation. In other sections like Garo's Walk, or the off-model art of Super Alloy Darkshine. This goes on. Some of the other characters' art is inconsistent, not with the design, but the style of animation. See, sometimes we have thick, hard lines with super characterized moments, and in others we have very thin lines and seemingly overall less detail. I think this is probably down to the fact that they posted some shots from the first episode, and in those shots we had no hard lines, and an outcry from the fans really wanted more detail. So they added thicker lines and more elegant details. I believe they made those changes, and that's why at times we see inconsistent art styles, as these were maybe shots that didn't get the full touch that they needed. And then we get to episode 2. Although there's a lot more animation, in the opening shot we open with, I think, maybe 40 seconds of panning shots within the first 5 minutes, which realistically is a very poor decision, especially to have 2 of these long panning shots at the very start of the episode. It realistically would set a very bad precedent for the rest of the episode, and this would add fuel to the fire that would ignite when people saw the animation here, or lack thereof. See, even though there's animated characters running in the background, people aren't going to look at that. People are going to look at their main character, the character in question, the character that they want to see more of. And he has this sliding animation that looks straight out of PowerPoint, unfortunately. Although there are very tiny details on the grass, they should have had dirt. He's sliding on grass. What's underneath the grass? What would be kicked up? If you've ever done a slide tackle on a football pitch, you know well that dirt comes up. This quality of work is something that most people wouldn't find acceptable for this IP. One Punch Man is a unbelievably detailed manga and unbelievably well written. So I fully understand why people are upset, even though it's as well animated as many of the other seasonal shows. But when it comes to One Punch Man and a lot of shonen IPs in general, most people, especially the manga readers, expect it to be well animated so that it offers something new to the webcomic and manga readers alike. So for the average consumer, this anime aired after a 6-year wait. Even the most reasonable of people will get upset and look for somewhere to blame. If you need to find an example of someone who is usually so overwhelmingly level-headed, look no further than most critical Penguin Z0, Charlie. He made a very passionate video about how he feels. He's very disappointed with the mishandling of the anime, and that's 100% true. This anime was mishandled. 1000%. See, Charlie is a perfect example of what the average anime fan is experiencing when they are watching season 2 and then 3 of One Punch Man. It's a step down for a show that brought him such an enjoyable experience previously. It was very disappointing for that experience to be lessened. People often bring up the popularity of the anime, saying how could you let something so popular fall? The art in the manga is unbelievable, and at times it's so detailed that it's almost takes up the mantle of animatic itself. It's not fair that we get this adaptation. That's when people like Charlie start to look for someone to blame. And because of how anime is produced, this old, manipulative, corrupt way, that leaves only one place you realistically can look, and that's towards JC staff, and that's not fair. The mishandling of the IP. What is a production committee? A production committee is a consortium made up of publishers, TV networks, music labels, ad agencies, merch toy, and film distributors. These entities bankroll an anime and split the rights and profit in proportion to their investment. The animation studio is frequently not a member of said committee. It is hired on a non-fixed fee contract and has little to no back-end upsides. These committee members that I mentioned before control the IP's exploitation, broadcast, streaming, discs, music, merch, events, everything, because they put the money in and own the rights. The studio, unless it buys a seat on the committee, which most can't afford, is a subcontractor with minimal say over creative or scheduling and share no downstream revenue. This imbalance persists because 1. The risk capital sits with the committee, and 2. Rights are allocated to only the investors. 3. The bargaining power is with the publishers, meaning that there is no leeway, meaning that the animation studios realistically have no chips to play. Studios are fragmented, numerous, and often quite poor and desperate. Committees are typically credited generically with one big name, rather than listing every corporate seat with voting weight. Everything is private, approvals, splits, and all the back and forth between the committee and the production studio. That makes it hard for fans, or even many staff, to know who made which call. So public anger defaults to the only visible party, the animation studio. Studios carry all the day-to-day risk without any upside. Most studios are paid a fixed production fee and do not share in the success of something they made. If a show explodes, the publisher, TV, music, the committee, not the animators, make all the profit. According to Morikawa, unless they hold the rights via committee seats, something only capitalist players like Toei and IG Port can routinely do, they won't make any money. This leaves the animation studios running on a thread, always overworking just to stay afloat. Many reports show an industry dominated by small, thin margins, studios that survive by accepting jobs that they realistically can't fulfill and outsourcing the work that they can't do. This is a practice that all small anime studios do and is exactly the conditions that hurt schedule quality. And the accountability is blurred because the committee's internal votes are private and the on-screen face is the studio. Public backlash and harassment often targets the people who didn't make the choices that caused the problems. Do studios really make that little? Why could MAPPA make such quality, for example, if they aren't making much money? Journal of Anime and Manga Studies explains that anime studios with limited financial resources are unable to participate in committees and instead work as subcontractors, receiving, as I said earlier, production fees. As a result, many studios don't generate any income when their works are successful. This is to be contrasted with something like Toei Animation, which earns a steady income because it owns the copyrights of said investments. So because One Piece does so well, they actually make a profit. Same with Dragon Ball. They own the copyright. You know this if you've ever tried to use their music in any YouTube works, because they come for that money. Committees set almost everything that governs quality, budget, timeline, headcount, but they're shielded by anonymity and by the generic guise of the title of production committee. So why exactly does this feel manipulative? Well, the committees set everything down and they govern the entire production. The fact that they hide their faces with the title of production committee, then the studio becomes a lightning rod for fan anger over decisions that they didn't make and couldn't veto or have any impact on. If a schedule collapses, it's the studio that is lit ablaze and takes the PR hit. The animation studio is forced to shoulder all that comes after, to pick up their reputation, to pick up the blame, to pick up the fact that they had a failed project, which is an unbelievably big deal for an anime production. Spending 6 months on an anime only for it to do terribly could destroy most anime studios. However, if the work that they toil and sweat over succeeds, all that happens is that they don't receive backlash, that they get to work another day. There's no bonus. There's no reward. If an anime succeeds, the production committee comes in and takes the lion's share of the financial reward, which trickles down to the other committee members. This system forces anime studios to take on as much work as they possibly can, overworking their staff just to make sure that that staff has a job to come back to. Bottom line, the production committee system does spread financial risk, but it also centralizes control with investors, obscures accountability, and structurally denies most anime studios from any share of said upside. That combination explains the chronic underinvestment, rushed schedules, and why criticism often hits the studio while the decision makers remain comfy and out of harm, criticism, or any form of issue.